Ramaphosa's government has failed to rescue South Africa from falling into a recession. Yesterday, Stats SA released GDP figures confirming 2 negative growth quarters. I'm joined now by political analyst Khaya Sithole to discuss the way forward, if there is one. Khaya, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. I had a little chuckle when I read your tweet yesterday saying, whatever the president does, please, I hope he doesn't express shock when it's announced we're going into a recession. And he was quite clear. I think he must have read your tweet. Not at all shocked.
Yeah. Look, again, I think the president obviously has built up a bad track record of saying that he's shocked about particular things. And you think that in matters of strategic international importance, the president must have a think tank somewhere behind him that says, look, this is what we think the trajectory is going to be, and this is what the response should be when you go out there into the public. So the terms that he used to use before, when he was shocked about load shedding, when he was shocked about things that all of us knew were going to happen, didn't help him. And I think in yesterday's conversation, he took a different track and saying, well, actually, it's not surprising, because the reality here is that if you look at where we were 3 to 6 months ago and what we did in order to intervene, it simply means that because you don't do the right interventions, the results are going to get worse until you do something differently. Evidently, nothing differently has been done to change the track of the economy in the past 3 to 6 months. So therefore, it shouldn't surprise anyone when the outcomes are as dire as we see them.
Very bleak picture, and David Masondo speaking at the moment at the Black Business Council Summit, saying that not since 2008 have things been so dire. Of course, that was the sort of the global economic downturn. But very interesting, economist Duma Kabule saying yesterday on Facebook that when the rest of the world recovered in 2009 onwards, South Africa did not. And that's why we're in such a pickle today. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the problem that we have is that the 2008 crisis has become a good sort of reference point for politicians to say, well, this is where the demise started. But of course, if you're looking at economic growth and economic indicators, you have to distinguish between the exogenous factors, which are the things that are not in your control, and the endogenous factors, which are the things that you can do yourself in order to ensure that you have a much stronger hold on your own economy. The South African context seems to be very reliant on external factors being the drivers of our economy. So the question that one should be asking is, for example, if you then hear that the coronavirus is going to lead to decline in global economic output, what is it that we can do as a country in order to make sure that we insulate ourselves from that? And because we've got such a tentative and a very weak hold, or a very weak understanding of what it is that we can do well and also amplify and maximize on that, it becomes difficult for us to know how to react. So of course, 2008 was over 12 years ago, and the global economy did indeed recover. In the South African context, the question should be, what is it that we should have done in response to 2008 in order to then say, if a global crisis hits, it hits us very hard. So therefore, let us try to ensure that whenever a similar crisis happens in the future, we're as insulated as possible, which would have meant that would have strengthened our endogenous economic drivers and our economic push. And I think in that in context, we haven't done that very well. So of course, we're always going to say, well, it happened before, but it's no longer a tenable excuse for them to use the 2008 financial crisis. The world has moved on. Why did we not?
Then surely the blame cannot be laid at Cyril Ramaphosa's door, because he wasn't the president.
Oh, no. I've never been of the opinion that Cyril Ramaphosa is in the wrong. It's the ANC government, and the ANC government has a much longer lifespan than Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa did not get elevated into the presidency 2 years ago. Cyril Ramaphosa has been part of the presidency in his capacity as deputy president. He's been part of the ANC for a very long time. Cyril Ramaphosa was a champion of the National Development Plan, which, when it was published, we were told this is the blueprint for the country to get somewhere. Now the question should be, all these years, now that we've created this blueprint, when these things happen, and now you actually have the keys to the main door, what is it that you've done? So I don't think that we've got a Cyril Ramaphosa problem. We've always had an ANC government problem. And the ANC government problem really stems from the fact that it doesn't exhibit a very clear understanding of how economic drivers work and how to then contextualize them in the South African context and then say, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to get there. So you've got this incoherence where they say one thing the one day and then thereafter they say something completely contradictory to what they've said before. So it's that inability of the ANC government to really manage this economy for the type of population and for the type of market that it operates in that's become the problem. So to zero in on just the Ramaphosa question seems to underestimate the impact of the greater governance paralysis that we have.
I have to ask for your opinion on what Cyril Ramaphosa said yesterday about the good examples during the apartheid years of how the government took pension funds to bolster Sasol, Eskom. Do you think that's a good example to use, and do you think it's a good thing to be comparing democratic South Africa's actions and options with what happened under apartheid?
Yeah, it's always difficult when the government then uses apartheid as a template for anything, because we know that the apartheid regime was an illegitimate one. But in relation to how they dealt with the type of economic problems that we have now, you must remember that South Africa was operating a closed economy simply because significant trade partners didn't want to engage with an illegitimate regime. So, of course, out of desperation, they then said, well, we're going to use these particular pensions in order to bolster those state-owned enterprises that needed to be boosted at that point in time. The fundamental question that we should ask is, does that model actually work in the current context, and is this the type of thing that we should be doing in order to fix the state enterprises? The problem, of course, is that we need to go back and say, what is the underlying reason why we've had to fix them in the first place? And these are the type of things that, again, these state-owned enterprises were not, they were not catastrophic by design. These are the things that have been engineered by the people that have been appointed to mismanage them. So all of those things need to be fixed, because, of course, we can decide we're going to use pensioners' money in order to fix them.
Do you think it would be a good thing to do? Do you think it's important that we do that?
I think we're running out of options, and when we do run out of options, the pensioners are unfortunately going to be the one that the government has to go to at some point in time. Whether it's ideal or whether it's morally justifiable, it's very difficult to explain. And I think if you're a pensioner sitting here thinking that I've done my bit, I've worked, I haven't stolen any money from the public purse, why am I the one that has to take the fall for this? It's a very difficult one to sell to pensioners. But I suspect that what you're going to see here is that at the end of the day, we have a unique situation in South Africa in relation to the public pensioners. Remember, the public pensions are a defined benefit fund, which means that when the government says that we want to take public pensioners, they're actually saying that we're taking taxpayers' money, because if I'm a pensioner as part of the government employees pension fund and I feel that I'm entitled to 10,000 rand as a pension tomorrow, if there's less than 10,000 rand tomorrow, well, the government simply goes into the national fiscus and tops up so that I get my money. So again, it's them talking about a pension fund when we know that they're actually talking about taxpayers. Now, that's in relation to the public pensioners. Now, whether you then want to then prescribe to particular private pension funds whether you should spend their money, of course, that's always a possibility. Now, do you have the appetite to do so, and what type of litigation and what type of pushback are you going to experience? And I suspect that the government hasn't really internalized what the limitations are going to be. But again, we're desperate as a country. The money has to come from somewhere, and I might not like it, you might not like it, but we have to go somewhere.
You're absolutely right, and you've done nothing to improve my mood this morning, but thank you very much for coming in to chat to us. That is Khaya Sithole, political analyst there.